Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. I'm going to start by mentioning the latest feature film produced by Rich Planet, which is entitled UFOs and NATO, the Human Mutilation Cover-Up. The film can be viewed online from this link and explores evidence that there has been a military-led cover-up of cases of human corpses being found mutilated in connection with UFO activity. The documentary follows my quest to meet with a former Black Ops soldier who worked for a NATO-controlled find and secure team. The purpose of this team was to secure areas over which the military have been targeting UFOs with a weapon based on a laser. They have allegedly been using these weapons in attempts to bring UFOs to the ground. I have requested that the documentary be shown on this channel, but the schedulers do not wish to broadcast it because some of the scenes and topics are too graphic. To repeat, you can watch it online free of charge from this link. In the film, I cover the testimony from a Black Ops whistleblower who described to me some of the find and secure operations he was involved in. One of these operations took place on the Brecon Beacons in the 1990s. He claimed that a car was discovered with no occupants in it on the Brecon Beacons with its engine running and the lights left on. After a helicopter search was conducted by his team, 2 corpses were discovered on Talabont Mountain near Talabont on Usk. The bodies were that of a 21-year-old man and a 16-year-old girl, laid out side by side and naked. Their bodies had all the hair removed, genitals had been surgically removed, and various other parts surgically removed with no traces of blood. Our source claimed that the bodies were removed by an American-led team and taken to MOD St. Athens military base, and the whole incident then covered up. My source would not reveal the date of this incident, as he said it would be giving me too much information. I can inform you that I have recently discovered possible corroborating evidence of this incident. I carried out a search of local newspapers from the 90s and found this article in the Brecon and Radnor Express dated the 23rd of August 1990. It reads, "Helicopter search for missing man. Police used their new helicopter and dogs in their search for a London man missing in Lambetta, Crickhowell on Monday. The man, who has not been named by the police, hired a car in London to visit friends in the Crickhowell and Swansea areas. The car was found with its lights illuminated and its engine running. There was no sign of the man. The man was later found in London in a confused state." This news article includes several facts which are in common with what the military source told me. These are: the date is the early 90s, the car was found with the lights on, the car's engine was still running, the car had no occupants, a helicopter search was conducted, and the location of the car, Lambetta, is just a few miles from Talabont Mountain, where our source claims the bodies were found. I recently took a trip to Lambetta to ask locals if they could remember the helicopter search. I spoke to 3 people who lived in Lambetta in 1990, and all of them remembered the helicopter search. A farmer showed me the location where the car was discovered in a lay-by just outside the village. He also said he thought there were 2 occupants missing from the car, not 1 as stated in the news article. He then added he believed nobody was ever found in connection with the car. The farmer claimed he was in touch with the police. His account contradicts 2 of the facts stated in the newspaper article. Firstly, that there were 2 people missing from the car, and secondly, that a man was not found in London in a confused state. It is quite possible that the man being found in London was a cover story put out to pacify public curiosity. If this news article is reporting the same incident reported to me by the military source, then it means the mutilated couple went missing on the 20th of August 1990. We are trying to find the identities of these 2 people. I am putting out an appeal for any information about a 21-year-old male who went missing on the 20th of August 1990, and any information about a 16-year-old female who also went missing on the 20th of August 1990. These people may have been from the South Wales area, but possibly further afield. Please put out the word, as I would very much like to trace their families. On with the show. In today's show, I will be speaking to Tony Bennett, a solicitor, investigator and campaigner who has written about and uncovered criminal activity and exposed police corruption. His book about the death of Stuart Lubbock at Michael Barrymore's house was serialised in the News of the World and exposed how the police bungled their £8 million investigation into the case. Today I will be speaking to a political campaigner, investigator, former social worker and solicitor, Tony Bennett. Welcome, Tony.
Good morning.
Now then, Tony, you've researched and written about many subjects in the fields of public policy, politics, also been involved in exposing criminal activity and also the cover-up of criminal activity. But could you tell us first, Tony, about your interest in politics and how you became involved in politics?
If we go back to the origins, I was at Sheffield University doing a geography degree, and really by accident I became interested in welfare issues, and I suppose it probably originated with the psychiatric problems of my landlady's niece,
right,
and who lived just a few doors down the road from me in Sheffield during my first year. And she was a girl from quite a well-off background, business background, but she had these crippling psychological problems which kept on putting her in psychiatric hospital.
Right. And
I visited her in psychiatric hospital and was quite stunned with this world of people who'd kind of failed and who had really serious psychological problems, and that generally got me interested in the welfare of less fortunate people, or people who got problems, if you like. And so in 1970, when I got my degree, my geography degree, I had loads of options before me, but decided that social welfare or welfare work was the way forward.
Right. And
I then was fortunate enough to get a place at the London School of Economics to do a diploma in what was called social administration. And that was a highly political course. Looking back now, many of the staff were open Marxists.
Right.
And their take really was that the capitalist system was failing, that social work was in fact a sort of a capitalist activity to kind of mask problems with that people had with lack of housing, poverty and so on. And so I kind of was going into welfare work, and then for that year was, as it were, re-educated to see many of the problems in society as caused by the failure of capitalism.
You've also represented people who've had children taken into care, is that right?
I got a job as a social worker in Derbyshire in 1973, and then got an MA in social work and qualified as a social worker a bit later. But I was always conscious of the need to campaign in some way on behalf of the poorer off, and in my capacity as a social worker I was beginning to represent people at social security tribunals. You could go to a social security tribunal and appeal about the amount of money you were getting per week, or the failure of the social security office to pay you a grant for clothing and things like that. All seems a bit outdated now, sort of 40 years on, but I kind of became involved in that more campaigning activity rather than just dishing out tea and sympathy, if you like. And by the time we get to 1978, I'd been in a social worker for about 5 or 6 years doing childcare and so on, and I then applied for a job which seemed right up my street, which was to be the welfare rights advisor for Harlow Council. And I didn't expect to get it, but I was offered the job back in 1978, and for the next 12 years or so of my career I was a welfare rights advisor, advising people in a very upfront campaigning way on their rights, making sure they knew what their rights were, making sure they obtained their rights. And as part of that, in 1980 I recognised a problem for families who'd got children in the care system. And I suppose the fundamental problem was that social workers had a great deal of power. They had the power to take children away, often without proper court hearings, and also the power to cut families completely off from their children. So a typical situation would be a parent, a mother perhaps, struggling to cope with children in poverty, struggling to cope, children perhaps going into care for a few months. And then instead of perhaps the parents being helped to to overcome their problems, the social workers would very rapidly think about long-term fostering, adoption, and be thinking in those terms. And the way it was done was quite brutal, and it still is in many cases. The natural parent is cut off completely from the new family.
Right.
And I saw from my experience as a social worker that damaged children, because no matter how many problems the children had at home, even in some of the worst situations, they had a loyalty to their mothers and fathers and so on. The children who were whisked away, as it were, into adoption, suffered from a lack of knowledge about where were their parents, were they dead, and that kind of thing.
Right. How would you compare the culture of that today then, from the 1980s?
Right. Partly through the campaigning work that I did, but many others did as well. We all recognised that there had to be a better balance between the rights of the natural parent and the rights of the child, and the rights of the adoptive parent. And basically in the 1970s we were campaigning for a new Children Act, which would restore the balance. And basically the Children Act 1989 made it more possible for the natural parents to challenge these decisions in the courts and that social workers are making. Right. And as a result of that, there was a better balance, and the parents had the right to be represented in court, represented when social workers made decisions and so on. Just to bring it up to date, there are many situations where unfortunately children do need to be cared for by others. The home situations are so bad that they do need to be cared for by others. But there is still a problem in children being adopted and then knowing nothing about their parents being cut off from their parents.
Right.